I'm Samantha, 32 years old, and I just walked into my own house to find my husband David tangled up in bedsheets with my sister Rebecca. The shocked expressions on their faces would have been comical if my heart wasn't currently imploding in my chest. David scrambled for a pillow to cover himself, while Rebecca just lay there, defiant as always. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely blindsided by betrayal. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. You know what they say about assumptions making you look like a fool? Well, I'd been assuming my sister was just being supportive lately, dropping by more often to help with the kids. Supportive, right. Because nothing says family loyalty like warming my husband's bed while I'm at work. Sam, I can explain, David started, but I held up my hand. Don't. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Just don't. Rebecca finally sat up, pulling the comforter around herself. Sammy, this isn't how we wanted you to find out. They had discussed this, planned it even. The betrayal cut deeper with that single word. How long? I asked, surprised by my own composure. They exchanged a look, and I swear I could hear the mental conversation. David cleared his throat. 6 months. 6 months. While I was planning Tommy's 7th birthday party and helping Emma with her kindergarten homework. While I was working 60-hour weeks as the marketing director at Henderson & Associates, trying to secure the promotion that would finally let us buy the house in Riverside that David always said we couldn't afford. The kids are at Mom's, I said quietly. You have 30 minutes to get dressed and figure out what you're going to tell them. David stood up, reaching for his clothes. Sam, we need to talk about this like adults. I laughed, and the sound surprised even me. Sharp, bitter. Adults? You mean like how adults communicate honestly with their spouses instead of having secret relationships with their sisters-in-law? Rebecca rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic. I'm being dramatic? I turned to face her fully. Becca, you're naked in my bed, in the sheets I washed yesterday. Using the lavender detergent you know I specially order because it helps me sleep better. And believe me, folks, the irony of my sleep-inducing sheets being used for this particular activity wasn't lost on me. For the first time, she looked uncomfortable. I walked to my dresser and started pulling out clothes. If they thought I was going to fall apart and give them the satisfaction of watching me crumble, they were wrong. I'd learned early in life that the Matthews family didn't tolerate weakness, and right now, I was going to use every ounce of strength my dysfunctional upbringing had taught me. Where are you going? David asked. To get my children. I paused at the bedroom door. Figure out your story. Because Tommy's going to ask why Daddy and Aunt Becca were having a sleepover without clothes. As I walked down the hallway of the house we'd bought together 3 years ago, past the family photos that suddenly felt like lies, I realized something that would have shocked me an hour earlier. I wasn't even surprised this was happening. Because deep down, I'd always known Rebecca took whatever she wanted, and apparently, what she wanted was my life. The drive to my parents' house gave me exactly 12 minutes to figure out how to hold myself together. 12 minutes to practice the fake smile I'd perfected over years of family gatherings where Rebecca was always the golden child, and I was always trying to prove my worth. Mom opened the door with flour on her apron and that particular brand of forced cheerfulness she reserved for uncomfortable situations. Behind her, I could hear Tommy and Emma arguing over a video game. Samantha, you're early. I thought David was picking them up at 6. Change of plans. I stepped inside, breathing in the familiar scent of her Sunday pot roast. Where's Dad? Garage, working on that old motorcycle again. She studied my face with the precision of a mother who'd spent 32 years reading my expressions. Everything all right, honey? Before I could answer, Emma came barreling around the corner, her dark hair wild from playing. Mommy! Grandma let us make cookies and Tommy ate 3 before dinner. Did not, Tommy's voice echoed from the living room. Did too. Tell her, Grandma. I knelt down to Emma's level, pulling her into a hug that lasted longer than necessary. She smelled like vanilla extract and childhood innocence, and I wanted to bottle this moment before everything changed. How about we head home and make our own cookies? I suggested. But Grandma's are better, Emma said with the brutal honesty of a 5-year-old. Emma, Mom chided gently. That's not nice. It's okay, I said, standing up. She's right. Grandma is better at a lot of things, including raising daughters who steal their sisters' husbands, apparently. The words came out more bitter than I intended, and Mom's eyebrows raised slightly. Tommy, come say goodbye to Grandma, I called. He appeared in the doorway, controller still in hand. 5 more minutes? Now, buddy. Something in my tone must have registered because he didn't argue further. He hugged Mom and headed toward the car. Sam, Mom said quietly, following me to the door. Are you sure everything's okay? I looked at her, this woman who'd raised 2 daughters so differently. Rebecca, the free spirit who could do no wrong. Samantha, the responsible one who always cleaned up the messes. Ask me again tomorrow, I said. The drive home was filled with Emma's chatter about the video game she'd beaten and Tommy's detailed explanation of why chocolate chip cookies were scientifically superior to oatmeal raisin. Normal kid stuff, the kind of conversations that might be split between 2 houses soon. When we pulled into the driveway, David's truck was gone. So was Rebecca's red Honda. Inside, I found a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to think. We'll talk tomorrow. D. Gone to think. Like this was a complex philosophical problem instead of a simple case of keeping your pants on around your wife's family members. I crumpled the note and started making dinner, letting Tommy and Emma's presence ground me in the routine of cutting vegetables and setting the table. This was what mattered. Not David's midlife crisis or Rebecca's latest attempt to take something that wasn't hers. Mom, you're cutting the carrots really tiny, Emma observed. I looked down. She was right. I'd been methodically chopping them into microscopic pieces. Sometimes when people are thinking hard about something, they do things without realizing it, I explained. What are you thinking about? I met her curious gaze, those big brown eyes that looked so much like mine. Changes, I said honestly. Sometimes things in families change, and we have to figure out how to handle it. Tommy looked up from his homework. What kind of changes? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. We need to talk. This affects the whole family. The whole family. As if she'd been considering family loyalty when she was redecorating my bedroom. With my husband, while I paid the mortgage. I showed Tommy how to check his math homework and helped Emma pick out clothes for school tomorrow. Normal Sunday night routines that felt surreal given the circumstances. After I tucked them in, I sat in my living room, looking at the life David and I had built together. The sectional sofa we'd argued about for 3 months before buying. The coffee table with ring stains from countless movie nights. The family photos where everyone looked happy. My phone rang. Rebecca's name flashed across the screen. I answered on the 4th ring. Before you say anything, she started. I need you to know this wasn't planned. It just happened. For 6 months, it just happened? Sam, you know David hasn't been happy. You work all the time. You're stressed constantly. You barely even talk to each other anymore. I stood up, pacing to the window. So you decided to fix my marriage by sleeping with my husband? I decided to be there for someone who needed support. David's been struggling, and you were too busy with your career to notice. The manipulation was so smooth, so perfectly Rebecca, that I almost admired it. She'd managed to make herself the victim and the hero simultaneously. Classic move from the woman who once convinced our parents that I broke her favorite vase when we both knew she'd thrown it at me. You're right, I said quietly. What? You're absolutely right. I have been working too much. I've been stressed. I haven't been the perfect wife. I paused, letting her think she was winning. But here's the thing, Becca. When my marriage was in trouble, the solution wasn't to invite my sister into my bed. It was to have an adult conversation with my husband about fixing our problems together. Sam, I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. You don't mean that. I looked out at the neighborhood where I'd imagined growing old with David, watching our kids graduate and get married and have children of their own. Actually, I said, I've never meant anything more in my life. Because sometimes, folks, the trash takes itself out. You just have to be smart enough to let it go. Monday morning arrived like a slap in the face. I'd managed maybe 3 hours of sleep, spent mostly staring at the ceiling and listening to David's absence in the creaking house. Getting the kids ready for school felt like moving through quicksand. Every normal routine, from Emma's insistence on wearing her lucky socks to Tommy's last-minute panic about a forgotten science project, reminded me that their entire world was about to change and they didn't even know it yet. Is Daddy coming to my soccer game on Saturday? Emma asked around a mouthful of cereal. We'll see, baby. He promised he'd bring the orange slices this time instead of forgetting like last week. I made a mental note to put oranges on my grocery list, just in case David's newfound relationship status affected his memory about parental responsibilities. Because apparently, remembering orange slices was harder than remembering marriage vows. After dropping them off at Riverside Elementary, I drove to Henderson & Associates with my resignation letter in my briefcase and divorce papers in my purse. I'd been up until 2 a.m. researching family lawyers and printing forms from legal websites. The irony wasn't lost on me that David and I worked for the same marketing firm. He was the creative director. I was the marketing director. We'd met in this building 8 years ago when I was a junior account executive, and he was the charming senior designer who always brought good coffee to Monday morning meetings. Now I was about to blow up both our careers along with our marriage. Samantha, my assistant Kelly looked concerned. You're 30 minutes early. Are you feeling all right? Just eager to get started, I lied, heading into my office. I'd barely sat down when David knocked on my door frame. He looked terrible, exhausted and rumpled like he'd slept in his truck. Probably had. We need to talk. Not here. I didn't look up from my computer screen. Not at work. Sam, please. Just 5 minutes. 5 minutes to say what? That you're sorry? That it was a mistake? That Rebecca seduced you against your will? I finally looked up, because we both know that's not what happened. He stepped inside and closed the door. 5 minutes to talk about what happens next. For Tommy and Emma. That got my attention. You should have thought about Tommy and Emma before you decided to have an affair with their aunt. This doesn't have to destroy our family. People work through these things. I laughed, and several people in the hallway turned to look through my glass office walls. Great. By lunch, the entire office would be speculating about David and Samantha's marriage. Not that it mattered anymore. Work through these things? David, you didn't have a one-night stand with some random woman. You had a 6-month relationship with my sister. You brought her into our bed, into our house, around our children. You want to work through that? His silence was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. I'm filing for divorce today. I'm taking the kids. You're going to find somewhere else to live. And if you think Rebecca is going to play happy stepmother to Tommy and Emma, you're delusional. You can't just take the kids. Watch me. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Rebecca told me what happened. We need to talk. Family meeting tonight at 7. Of course. Rebecca had gotten to them first, probably with some sob story about how love just couldn't be denied and how David and I were never really happy anyway. Because that's what you do when you steal your sister's husband. You immediately start the damage control campaign. Your sister called my parents too, David said, reading over my shoulder. She's trying to get everyone together to discuss this rationally. Rationally. I turned back to my computer and opened the resignation letter I'd typed at 3 a.m. Nothing about this situation is rational, David. But you're right about one thing. We do need to discuss what happens next. I hit print and stood up to retrieve the letter from the shared printer. Half the office watched me walk down the hallway, and I could practically hear the gossip mill churning. When I returned, David was still standing in my office, looking lost. What's that? He asked, nodding toward the paper in my hand. My resignation. His face went pale. Sam, you can't quit. We both work here. The kids need the stability, the insurance. The kids need a lot of things. Stability was one of them. But that's gone now, isn't it? I sat back down and read through the letter one more time. Professional, brief, effective immediately. Just like the end of my marriage. If you quit, how are you going to support yourself? Support them? I looked at him across the desk where we'd sometimes eaten lunch together, where he'd helped me practice presentations for client meetings, where just last month he'd brought me soup when I was sick. That's not your concern anymore. Have you ever experienced betrayal so deep it changed your entire perspective on family loyalty? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this family meeting was about to reveal just how alone I really was. The family meeting was held at my parents' house, in the same living room where we'd opened Christmas presents and celebrated birthdays, and pretended to be a functional family for 32 years. I arrived at exactly 7 o'clock to find everyone already there. David sat on the couch next to Rebecca, her hand resting on his arm in a gesture that was probably meant to look supportive, but came across as possessive. My parents occupied their usual chairs, Dad looking uncomfortable, Mom wearing her "we need to fix this" expression. Sam, honey, sit down, Mom said, patting the empty spot on the love seat. I remained standing. Something about sitting felt like surrendering ground I couldn't afford to lose. Plus, I had a better view of the whole circus from here. Rebecca told us what happened, Dad said, clearing his throat. This is a difficult situation for everyone. Difficult. I repeated the word like I was testing its weight. That's an interesting way to describe adultery. Sam, Mom said sharply. Language. I'm sorry, what's the preferred family-friendly term for sleeping with your sister's husband? I glanced around the room. Extracurricular activities? Special friendship? Advanced sister bonding? Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. Sam, you're making this harder than it needs to be. I'm making this harder? I felt something snap inside me, like a rubber band stretched too far. Becca, you're sitting in my parents' living room holding hands with my husband while lecturing me about making things difficult. He's not your husband anymore, she said quietly. He hasn't been happy for a long time. The silence that followed was deafening. Not one person in that room defended me. Not one person pointed out that marriage problems don't get solved by bringing in a third party. Not one person suggested that maybe, just maybe, Rebecca had crossed a line that shouldn't exist. So this is my fault, I said. No one's saying it's your fault, Mom said carefully. But marriage is complicated, and sometimes people grow apart. And sometimes sisters sleep with their brother-in-law. I shrugged. You know, regular Tuesday night activities. Dad rubbed his forehead. Sam, what's done is done. Now we need to figure out how to move forward as a family. As a family. I looked around the room. David cheats on me with Rebecca, and we're all just going to hold hands and pretend this is normal family dysfunction? People make mistakes, Mom said. But Tommy and Emma need their father. They need stability. They need honesty. They need to know that actions have consequences. David leaned forward. Sam, I know I hurt you. But Rebecca and I, this is real. We're not trying to hurt anyone. You're not trying to hurt anyone? I stared at him. David, you destroyed our marriage. You betrayed our children's trust. You turned my sister into my enemy. But you're not trying to hurt anyone? What David means, Rebecca interjected, is that we didn't plan this. Sometimes love just happens. Love. She called it love. Because nothing says true love like a 6-month affair behind your sister's back. How long have you been in love with my husband, Becca? She glanced at David before answering. Feelings develop over time. We tried to fight it. You tried to fight it. For 6 months. In my bed. I nodded thoughtfully. That's some impressive fighting. Really gave it your all. Sam, Mom said, this kind of anger isn't healthy. Maybe you should consider counseling. There it was. The suggestion that I was the problem. That my reaction to being betrayed was somehow more concerning than the betrayal itself. You're right, I said. I should definitely get counseling to help me understand why I'm upset about my husband and sister's affair. You're being sarcastic, Dad observed. I'm being honest. For the first time in this conversation, someone is being completely honest. I looked at each of them. These people who were supposed to be my support system, who were supposed to have my back when the world fell apart. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. I'm filing for divorce. I'm requesting primary custody of Tommy and Emma. David can see them on weekends once he figures out where he's living. You can't keep the children from their father, Mom said. I'm not keeping them from their father. I'm keeping them from the chaos their father created. Rebecca stood up. Sam, you're being vindictive. This isn't about the kids. This is about your pride. My pride. As if wanting my children to understand that marriage vows meant something was purely about ego. You know what, Becca? You're absolutely right. This is about my pride. I'm proud that I kept my marriage vows. I'm proud that I never betrayed someone who trusted me. I'm proud that when my life gets complicated, I don't solve my problems by destroying other people's lives. Nobody destroyed anything, David said. We are all adults here. I walked to the mantel where family photos were displayed in neat rows. Tommy's first day of kindergarten. Emma's dance recital. Our wedding photo, where Rebecca stood next to me in a blue bridesmaid dress, smiling like she was genuinely happy for us. Adults, I repeated. Yes, let's talk about being adults. Adults communicate when their marriages are in trouble. Adults go to counseling. Adults don't sneak around for 6 months having sex in their spouse's bed. Sam, Mom started. Adults also don't defend adultery, I continued, turning back to face them. They don't minimize betrayal. They don't blame the victim for being upset about being victimized. The room fell quiet. Outside, I could hear neighborhood kids playing in someone's backyard, their laughter carrying through the evening air. Normal family sounds from normal families. I think we should all take some time to cool down, Dad said finally. Good idea. I picked up my purse. I'll be cooling down at a divorce lawyer's office tomorrow morning. As I walked toward the door, Rebecca called after me. Sam, wait. We can work this out. We're family. I turned back one last time. No, Becca. Family doesn't sleep with each other's husbands. Family doesn't choose sides when someone gets betrayed. Family doesn't blame the victim for being hurt. I paused in the doorway. But you're right about one thing. We are family, which makes this so much worse. Because nothing says family values like a good old-fashioned affair, folks. Really brings everyone together. Tuesday morning brought the crushing reality of single parenthood. Emma couldn't find her favorite unicorn shirt, Tommy announced he'd forgotten about a book report due that day, and the coffee maker decided to break down just when I needed caffeine most. By the time I got them to school and made it to Miller & Associates Family Law, I felt like I'd already run a marathon, and it wasn't even 9 a.m. Patricia Miller was exactly what I'd hoped for in a divorce attorney. Sharp, direct, and completely unsympathetic to sob stories about affairs being complicated. 6 months is a long-term relationship, not a momentary lapse in judgment, she said, reviewing the timeline I'd provided. And the fact that it's with your sister adds an element of emotional cruelty that courts don't look favorably on. What about custody? I asked. Given that the affair took place in the marital home where the children live, that strengthens your position. Courts prioritize stability for minor children. I signed papers, wrote a retainer check, and walked out feeling like I'd finally taken some control back. My phone had 17 missed calls from David. I was scrolling through them when it rang again. Rebecca's name flashed across the screen. What? I answered. Sam, you need to come to Mom and Dad's. Now. I'm busy destroying my marriage, remember? According to you anyway. This is about your job. My stomach dropped. What about my job? Just come, please. 20 minutes later, I walked into my parents' living room to find David sitting across from Mom and Dad, looking like someone had died. What's going on? I asked. David looked up with red-rimmed eyes. Henderson fired me. I sat down heavily in the nearest chair. What? Why? Office relationships, Dad said grimly. Apparently there's a policy about employees and intimate relationships, especially when it creates workplace drama. David doesn't supervise me. We're at the same level. Doesn't matter, David said. HR said it creates potential for conflict. With you filing for divorce, he shrugged helplessly. So they fired you instead of me? They fired both of us. The words hit like a physical blow. Both of us? Mom leaned forward. Sam, honey, they called you this morning. Kelly took a message, something about creating a hostile work environment. I pulled out my phone and saw the missed call from my boss, Richard Henderson. 3 missed calls, actually. This is insane, I said. I haven't created any hostile work environment. I've been completely professional. Except for yesterday, David said quietly. When you printed your resignation letter on the shared printer. And when you raised your voice in your office, people heard. People heard what? Me being upset that my husband cheated on me? People heard you talking about private family matters at work, Mom said. Richard Henderson called here looking for you. He was very concerned about the company's reputation. I stared at them. So let me understand this. David has a 6-month affair with my sister. I file for divorce. And somehow I'm the one creating a hostile work environment? You both are, Rebecca said from the doorway. She'd been listening from the hallway. This is why I told you to handle this quietly. Quietly? I laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. You mean like how you and David handled your relationship quietly for 6 months? I turned to look at her. Oh, wait, that's exactly how you handled it. My mistake. The point is, Dad interrupted, you're both unemployed now, with 2 children to support. The reality started sinking in. No job meant no health insurance for Tommy and Emma. No steady income. No way to pay the mortgage on the house I'd planned to keep in the divorce. David has his freelance clients, Mom said. He'll be fine. But Sam, you need to think practically about this. Practically. Like it was my fault that I'd lost my job because my husband couldn't keep his pants on. What are you suggesting? I asked. Mom and Dad exchanged a look. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably in the doorway. Maybe, Mom said carefully. This is a sign that you should reconsider the divorce. For the children's sake. For the children's sake? I should stay married to a man who cheated on me with my sister? For the children's sake, Dad said. You should consider what's best for their financial security. I looked around the room at these people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, who were supposed to support me when life fell apart, who were supposed to understand that some betrayals couldn't be forgiven. You want me to stay married to David so he can support me financially. We want you to think about Tommy and Emma's future, Mom said. I am thinking about their future. I'm thinking about raising them to understand that marriage vows mean something, that betrayal has consequences, that people who love you don't sleep with your sister. Sometimes people make mistakes, Rebecca said softly. Mistakes. I stood up. 6 months isn't a mistake, Becca. It's a lifestyle choice. I walked to the window and looked out at the neighborhood where I'd grown up, where I'd learned that family meant everything, where I'd believed that the people who loved you would always have your back. I lost my job because my husband couldn't keep his affair private enough, I said. I'm about to lose my house because I can't afford the mortgage on unemployment benefits. My children are going to have their world turned upside down because their father decided he was unhappy. I turned back to face them. But somehow, I'm the one who needs to reconsider my choices. The silence stretched until Rebecca spoke up. Sam, there's something else we need to tell you. Oh, wonderful, because this day wasn't complete without another bombshell. David and I are getting married, and I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Pregnant, I repeated. Rebecca nodded, her hand moving protectively to her still flat stomach. 3 months along. 3 months. She'd been carrying David's baby since the beginning of their affair. Does the family know? We just told them, David said, before you arrived. Of course they had. While I was at a divorce lawyer's office, David and Rebecca were sharing joyful baby news with my parents. This changes things, Mom said gently. For the children, Tommy and Emma are going to have a little brother or sister. Half-brother or sister, I thought. But I didn't say it out loud. They need stability during this transition, Rebecca added. Having their parents fighting in court isn't good for anyone. I looked at this woman who'd systematically destroyed my marriage, stolen my husband, and was now lecturing me about what was good for my children. You're right, I said quietly. Everyone looked surprised. You're absolutely right. The children need stability. They need to understand that actions have consequences. They need to see their mother standing up for herself instead of accepting whatever scraps her family decides to throw her. I picked up my purse and headed for the door. Where are you going? Mom called. To pick up my children and start building a life that doesn't require me to pretend that betrayal is acceptable. Behind me, I heard Rebecca say, Sam, this isn't how we wanted things to go. I didn't turn around. Becca, nothing about this situation has been about what I wanted. But that was about to change. 3 weeks later, I was making lattes for corporate executives who used to be my peers at Murphy's coffee shop downtown. The pay was terrible, the hours were inconsistent, and my 24-year-old boss Jake treated me like his personal coffee-making assistant. But it was honest work, and it kept me busy enough to avoid thinking about the custody papers David's lawyer had served me. Joint custody with alternating primary residence, Patricia Miller had explained. It's unusual, but not unheard of when one parent has significantly better financial resources. Significantly better financial resources. David's freelance business had magically taken off after our divorce became public. Apparently, Richard Henderson had been very generous with referrals. Rebecca's promotion at Davidson Marketing came with stock options and a company car. Meanwhile, I was learning to foam milk and trying to figure out how to explain to Tommy and Emma why they'd be spending half their time living with their father and pregnant stepmother-to-be. The lunch rush was brutal that Tuesday. Downtown office workers lined up 20 deep, all wanting complex specialty drinks immediately. I'd just finished a particularly complicated order when my phone buzzed. A text from David. Rebecca had the baby shower yesterday, lots of family there. The baby shower I hadn't been invited to, where my parents celebrated Rebecca's pregnancy while I served overpriced coffee to strangers. I was staring at the message when an older gentleman approached the counter. Distinguished, well-dressed, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Are you Samantha Richards? He asked. My heart skipped. Process servers, debt collectors, more legal papers? Yes. My name is James Morrison. I'm an attorney representing the estate of Harold Murphy. I glanced around the busy coffee shop. This didn't seem like the place for legal discussions. I'm sorry, I don't know any Harold Murphy. He was your ex-husband's uncle. He passed away 2 weeks ago. David's Uncle Harold. I'd only met him twice. Both times at family gatherings David had dragged me to in New York. Harold was David's father's brother, a successful businessman who'd never married and had no children. He'd always been kind to me. Asked thoughtful questions about my work, remembered details about Tommy and Emma. I'm sorry for your loss, I said, but I'm not sure why you're here. James Morrison lowered his voice. Mr. Murphy left very specific instructions in his will regarding you and your children. Could we perhaps discuss this privately after your shift? I get off at 4. Perfect. I'll return then. The rest of my shift crawled by. Every customer seemed to order the most complicated drink possible, and my mind kept wandering to Harold Murphy. What could David's uncle possibly have left for me? At exactly 4:05, James Morrison returned. I'd changed out of my coffee-stained apron and tried to make myself look presentable. We found a quiet corner table away from the afternoon laptop crowd. Ms. Richards, he began, opening his briefcase. Harold Murphy had no wife, no children, and was estranged from most of his family. His will, revised just days before his death, leaves his entire estate to you and your children. I stared at him. I'm sorry, what? You're the sole beneficiary of Harold Murphy's estate. That's impossible. I barely knew him. James pulled out a thick folder. Mr. Murphy was very specific about his reasons. He left a letter explaining his decision. He handed me an envelope with my name written in shaky handwriting. How much? I whispered. The total estate is valued at approximately $80 million. The words hit like a physical blow. $80 million. That includes commercial properties in Manhattan, residential properties in the Hamptons, and a chain of successful coffee shops throughout New York. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling over. Coffee shops? Murphy's Coffee. 15 locations throughout Manhattan and Brooklyn. Very profitable. I looked around the shop where I'd been making minimum wage plus tips, where I'd been struggling to pay rent and buy groceries and figure out how to afford Christmas presents for Tommy and Emma. There's more, James continued. Mr. Murphy established education trusts for your children. College, graduate school, whatever they want. It's all covered. My hands were shaking as I opened Harold's letter. Dear Samantha, if you're reading this, I've passed on, and James has found you to deliver my final wishes. I know this will come as a shock, but I hope you'll understand my reasoning. In the few times we met, I saw something in you that reminded me of my younger self. Strength, dignity, and the ability to keep going when others would have given up. When David called to tell me about the divorce, he mentioned that you'd been treated poorly by people who should have protected you. That didn't sit right with me. I've spent my life building businesses and accumulating wealth, but I never had a family of my own. Watching you with Tommy and Emma at David's birthday party last year, I saw the kind of mother I would have wanted my children to have. The kind of woman who deserves better than what life has handed her. Use this money wisely. Give your children the future they deserve. And don't let anyone make you feel guilty for accepting what I freely chose to give. You earned this by being the person you are when you thought no one was watching. Sincerely, Harold Murphy P.S. The coffee shops practically run themselves. You have good managers. Trust them. I read the letter twice, tears blurring the words. Ms. Richards? James was studying my face with concern. Are you all right? I need to call my children. Of course, but there are some legal matters we should discuss first. The transfer of assets will take several weeks to complete, but I've arranged for immediate access to operating funds. You'll want to visit the Manhattan properties soon to meet with the management teams. Manhattan. I'd always dreamed of living in New York, but it had seemed impossible with David's career anchored in Chicago. Now I could live anywhere I wanted. What about custody arrangements? I asked. If I move to New York? That's outside my area of expertise, but I can recommend excellent family law attorneys in New York who specialize in interstate custody matters. I thought about David and Rebecca in their perfect new life, planning their wedding and preparing for their baby. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd pushed me to the margins of my children's lives. They had no idea what was coming. Mr. Morrison, I said, when can I see the properties? As soon as you'd like. I can arrange a trip for this weekend if that works for you. Perfect. I stood up, feeling steadier than I had in months. And Mr. Morrison, this conversation stays between us for now. Of course. As he walked away, I realized that for the first time since finding David and Rebecca in my bed, I wasn't thinking about survival. I was thinking about possibilities. And revenge. Definitely thinking about revenge. The conversation with Tommy and Emma about moving to New York was easier than I'd expected. We sat on the living room floor after dinner, the three of us in a circle, and I tried to find words that would make sense of our new reality. How would you feel about living in New York for a while? I asked. Tommy looked up from his Lego construction project. Like visiting? Like living there, going to school there. Making new friends there? Emma climbed into my lap. What about Daddy? Daddy would still be your daddy. You'd visit him during school breaks and summers. What about Aunt Becca and the baby? I took a deep breath. Aunt Becca and Daddy are going to get married soon. And when their baby comes, they're going to need time to be family together. Are we not family anymore? Tommy asked. And my heart broke a little. You and Emma and I will always be family. Always. But Daddy is making a new family too. Will we have our own rooms? Emma asked, ever practical. Yes, baby. Big rooms with windows and space for all your toys. The questions came in a rush after that. What about their friends? What about their school? Would I be there too? I answered as honestly as I could, watching their faces process the idea of another massive change in their small lives. Can we think about it? Emma asked. Of course. It's a big decision. That night, after they were asleep, I called Patricia Miller to discuss the custody implications of the move. New York could actually work in our favor, she said. If David agrees to the move, it shows he's prioritizing his new relationship over daily contact with his children. That strengthens your position for future custody modifications. What if he fights it? Then we show the court your new financial circumstances and your ability to provide superior educational and cultural opportunities for the children in New York. Superior opportunities, like private schools and music lessons and college funds that were fully endowed. The next morning, David came by to discuss the move. We sat in the backyard while Tommy and Emma played on their swing set, pretending this was a normal co-parenting conversation. "So you're really thinking about New York?" he asked. "I'm thinking about what's best for my children." Our children. I let that slide. Yes, our children. Rebecca and I talked about it. We think it might be good for everyone to have some distance while we adjust to being married. There it was. Rebecca wanted me gone so she could play house without interference. How generous of you both. David shifted uncomfortably. Sam, I know this is awkward, but we're trying to do what's right. Right for who? For everyone. The kids need stability, and with the baby coming, your baby needs space that my children's presence might complicate. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? I watched Emma push Tommy on the swing, their laughter carrying across the yard. David, be honest. You want me to take the kids to New York so you can start fresh with Rebecca without daily reminders of your first family. He was quiet for a long moment. Maybe some distance would be healthy. For who? For all of us. I thought about Harold's letter, about the education trusts for Tommy and Emma, about the opportunities waiting for us in Manhattan. You're right, I said. Distance would be very healthy. So you'll consider it? I've already decided. We're moving to New York. Relief flooded his face. When? 2 weeks. 2 weeks? The relief turned to panic. Sam, that's really fast. The kids need time to adjust, to say goodbye to their friends. The kids are resilient. They'll adjust. What about visitation? How will I see them? I pulled out my phone and showed him the ticket confirmation I'd booked that morning. They'll fly back for Thanksgiving. You can have them for a week. A week? Sam, that's not enough time. It's more time than Rebecca gave me to adjust to her relationship with you. David fell quiet, finally understanding that the balance of power had shifted. What about Christmas? We'll alternate years. This year they'll be with me. Sam, please. I know I hurt you, but don't punish the kids because you're angry with me. I looked at him, this man who'd thrown away our marriage for my sister, who was now concerned about being punished. David, I'm not punishing anyone. I'm giving my children opportunities you could never provide. What opportunities? I thought about telling him about the inheritance, about the $80 million that had just made his child support payments irrelevant. But something held me back. Better schools, cultural experiences, a fresh start away from the drama you and Rebecca created. He nodded reluctantly. I guess I can't argue with that. No, you can't. That evening, I called James Morrison to confirm our trip to New York for the weekend. Excellent, he said. I've arranged meetings with the property managers and the coffee shop executives. You'll want to see everything before making any major decisions. What kind of decisions? Whether you want to be actively involved in running the businesses or prefer to remain a silent partner. Whether you want to live in the Manhattan penthouse or the Hamptons estate. Whether you want to keep all the properties or sell some of them. Decisions. Real choices about my future instead of just reacting to other people's betrayals. Mr. Morrison, what would you do if you were me? I'd take my time, learn the businesses, and make choices based on what would make me happiest. You have the luxury now of choosing your life instead of having it chosen for you. After I hung up, I walked through the house I'd thought I'd live in forever. Tommy's artwork on the refrigerator, Emma's ballet shoes by the front door, the family photos that would need to be packed or left behind. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Heard you're moving to New York, probably for the best. Fresh start for everyone. Probably for the best. She was so eager to get me out of the picture that she couldn't even pretend to be sad about us leaving. I typed back, yes, fresh starts are wonderful. Congratulations on getting everything you wanted. But I didn't hit send. Because soon Rebecca was going to learn that getting everything you wanted sometimes meant getting exactly what you deserved. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments, because this story is about to take a turn nobody saw coming. The weekend trip to New York changed everything. James Morrison met us at JFK with a car service and an itinerary that made my head spin. Tommy and Emma were wide-eyed at the city skyline, pressing their faces to the windows as we drove through Manhattan. Mom, are all these buildings really that tall? Emma asked. Taller, I said, staring up at the skyscrapers myself. Our first stop was the penthouse apartment on the Upper West Side. When the elevator opened directly into the foyer, I thought there'd been a mistake. This can't be right, I told James. 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, roof deck with city views, he said, leading us inside. Harold bought it as an investment property, but it's been vacant for 2 years. The apartment was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows, hardwood floors, and a kitchen that belonged in a magazine. Emma immediately claimed the room with the window seat, while Tommy was fascinated by the fire escape visible from his window. Can we really live here? Emma asked, spinning in circles in the living room. We really can, I said, and meant it. The coffee shop tour was equally impressive. 15 locations, all thriving, all managed by competent teams who'd been running things smoothly since Harold's death. He was a good boss, explained Maria Santos, the operations manager. Trusted us to do our jobs, never micromanaged. The employees loved him. What about the financial side, I asked. Profitable across the board. The Upper West Side location alone generates more revenue than most independent shops see in a year. I thought about the downtown Chicago location where I'd been scraping by on minimum wage, and almost laughed at the irony. That evening, we had dinner at a kid-friendly restaurant in Little Italy. Tommy and Emma chattered excitedly about the day, already planning which schools they wanted to visit, which playgrounds looked the most fun. So, what do you think? I asked them over dessert. I think New York is awesome, Tommy said. I think our new house is like a castle, Emma added. But what about Daddy? Tommy's excitement dimmed slightly. Daddy will still be Daddy. He can visit us here and you can visit him in Chicago. What about Aunt Becca? I chose my words carefully. Aunt Becca and Daddy are going to be very busy with their new baby. They might not have as much time for visits right away. Emma nodded solemnly. Babies need lots of attention. They do. Will we be happy here? Tommy asked. I looked at my children, these resilient, adaptable kids who'd been through so much change already. I think we'll be very happy here. Monday morning, I called David from the Chicago airport. We're taking it, I said without preamble. Taking what? New York. The kids love it. We're moving next weekend. Next weekend? Sam, that's crazy. You can't just uproot their entire lives on a whim. A whim. Like deciding to leave the city where my husband had cheated on me with my sister was some kind of impulse purchase. David, their lives were already uprooted when you decided to have an affair. I'm just giving them a better place to land. What about their friends, their school? They'll make new friends, find better schools. How are you even affording this? Last week you were working in a coffee shop. I paused, considering how much to reveal. I have opportunities in New York. Business opportunities. What kind of business opportunities? The kind that don't require me to depend on child support from a man who cheated on me. The silence stretched until David spoke again. Sam, I know you're angry. I'm not angry anymore, David. I'm done. Done with what? Done letting your choices control my life. Done accepting scraps. Done pretending that what you did was just a mistake I should get over. So you're running away. I looked out at the Chicago skyline, the city that had been my home for 32 years, where I'd met David, where I'd had my children, where I'd built a life that someone else had systematically destroyed. No, I said. I'm running towards something better. That week was a blur of packing, forwarding addresses, and difficult goodbyes. Rebecca called twice, both times to offer help I didn't need and advice I didn't want. Are you sure this is the right choice? She asked during the second call. Why? Having second thoughts about getting what you wanted? I never wanted you to leave Chicago. You wanted David. You got David. Everything else was just collateral damage. Sam, I know you don't believe this, but I do love you. You're my sister. I was taping up a box of Emma's books when she said it, and something about the finality of packing our lives away made me feel generous enough to respond honestly. Becca, here's the thing about love. It's not just a feeling. It's a choice. Every day, you choose to love someone or you choose to hurt them. For 6 months, you chose to hurt me every single day. You were trying to get what you wanted without consequences. But that's not how life works. The moving truck left on Thursday morning. The kids and I followed on Friday afternoon, flying first class to our new life in New York. As the plane lifted off from O'Hare, Emma grabbed my hand. Mom, are you sad about leaving? I thought about the question as Chicago disappeared beneath the clouds. I'm sad about some things, I said honestly. But I'm excited about everything we're going to discover. Will Daddy miss us? Yes, baby. Daddy will miss you very much. Will Aunt Becca miss us? I squeezed her hand. I think Aunt Becca will be too busy to miss us for a while. Good, Emma said with the brutal honesty of a 5-year-old. She wasn't being a very good aunt anyway. Out of the mouths of babes, folks. Sometimes kids see things more clearly than adults do. As we descended into JFK 3 hours later, I realized I wasn't thinking about David and Rebecca anymore. I wasn't calculating custody schedules or worrying about money or wondering if I'd made the right choice. I was thinking about the future Tommy, Emma, and I were going to build together, and that future looked pretty amazing. 6 months into our New York life, I was beginning to understand what happiness felt like again. The kids had adapted beautifully to their new school. I was learning to run a successful business empire, and for the first time in years, I was sleeping through the night. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office at the flagship Murphy's Coffee location when my assistant buzzed in. Ms. Richards, there's a call for you. David Richards from Chicago. I glanced at the clock. 2 p.m. in New York meant 1 p.m. in Chicago. David should have been at work, not calling me during business hours. Put him through. Sam? David's voice sounded strained. We need to talk. Is everything okay? Are the kids okay? The kids are fine. This is about other things. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the bustling Manhattan street below. What other things? Rebecca had the baby. Right. Rebecca had been due around now. I'd managed to forget about the pregnancy completely, which probably said something about my mental health. Congratulations. How is everyone? Good. Healthy. He's perfect. A son. Tommy and Emma's half-brother. I'm glad to hear it, David, but I'm not sure why you're calling me. Because I've been thinking about us, about our family. I sat up straighter. Our family? Tommy and Emma. About how much I miss them. About how this separation isn't working. David, they're doing great here. They love their school. They've made friends. I want them back, Sam. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Back? Back in Chicago. With me. I'm filing for a custody modification. I felt a familiar surge of anger, followed immediately by something that felt like amusement. Because David had no idea what he was walking into. On what grounds? On the grounds that I'm their father, and I want to be part of their daily lives, not just phone calls and holiday visits. You agreed to this arrangement, David. You encouraged it. I was wrong. I made a mistake. Another mistake. How convenient for you. Sam, please, I know you're angry, but think about what's best for Tommy and Emma. I am thinking about what's best for them. I think about it every day. They need their father. They have their father. You call them twice a week and see them on holidays. That was your choice. It was a bad choice. I want to fix it. I walked to my office window, looking down at the street where well-dressed people hurried to important meetings, where my children would grow up with opportunities David could never provide. David, what's really going on? 6 months ago, you couldn't wait to get us out of Chicago. Now suddenly you're father of the year? Silence on the other end of the line. David, things are complicated here. Complicated how? More silence. Rebecca's having a hard time adjusting to motherhood. She needs help. And I thought maybe if Tommy and Emma were here, there it was. The real reason for his sudden parental concern. You want my children to come back to Chicago to help babysit Rebecca's baby. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. Rebecca's overwhelmed with one infant, so you thought you'd bring back 2 more children for her to manage. Sam, that's not fair. Fair? I laughed, and it felt good. David, you want to talk about fair? Let's talk about what's fair. I walked back to my desk and opened the drawer where I kept the legal documents James Morrison had prepared months ago. It's fair that Tommy and Emma are thriving in an environment where they're not exposed to your drama. It's fair that they're getting the best education money can buy. It's fair that they're building a life where they don't have to tiptoe around their father's pregnant wife. Money isn't everything, Sam. You're right. Money isn't everything. But stability is. Security is. Knowing that their mother can provide for them is. It can provide for them too. Can you? Because last I heard, you were struggling to pay for Rebecca's medical bills. He went quiet again, and I knew I'd hit the mark. David, here's what's going to happen. You're going to withdraw your custody petition. You're going to focus on your new family. And you're going to let Tommy and Emma build their lives here without interference. And if I don't? I smiled, thinking about the team of lawyers James Morrison had on retainer. Then you're going to discover just how expensive fighting me will be. Sam, you're not the same person I married. You're absolutely right. The person you married would have accepted whatever you decided was best. The person you married would have put your needs above her own. The person you married would have let you walk all over her. I paused, savoring the moment. Lucky for me, that person doesn't exist anymore. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long moment, thinking about the man I'd once loved enough to marry, who was now calling me because his new life wasn't as perfect as he'd imagined. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. Mom, can we get pizza tonight? Emma wants to try that place with the brick oven. I smiled, typing back, absolutely. I'll pick you up from school at 3. How was work today? Perfect, baby. Work was perfect. And for once, that was completely true. Because sometimes the best revenge really is living well. And sometimes the people who hurt you end up creating their own consequences. David wanted his children back because his new life was harder than he'd expected. Too bad for him, we weren't available to fix his mistakes anymore. 2 months after David's custody threat, Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Tommy was excelling at his new school. Emma had joined a drama club that she loved, and I was discovering that running a business empire was actually easier than managing my ex-husband's emotional demands. I was having lunch at my desk when James Morrison called with news that would change everything again. "Samantha, we need to discuss something important. Can you come to my office this afternoon? Is everything all right? It's about David's custody petition. He's hired a lawyer." An hour later, I sat in James's Madison Avenue office, reading legal documents that made my blood boil. He's claiming I'm an unfit mother because I've exposed the children to an unstable lifestyle change, I said, reading from David's filing. He's also questioning your ability to provide adequate supervision given your business responsibilities. I looked up from the papers. He's questioning my ability to supervise my children while running the businesses I inherited? It gets worse. He's hired a private investigator to document your daily activities. Apparently, someone's been taking photos of you leaving the penthouse, attending business meetings, working late at the coffee shops. He's having me followed. It appears so. I thought about Rebecca, who'd probably suggested this strategy, who'd probably convinced David that I was neglecting Tommy and Emma while building my new life. What does his lawyer think he can prove? That you're too busy with your career to properly parent? That the children would be better off in Chicago with their father and stepmother? Their stepmother, who was too overwhelmed with one baby to handle daily life? He's not mentioning that part in his filing. I stood up, pacing to the window that looked out over Central Park. Somewhere in that park, my children were probably playing, happy and secure in the life we'd built together. "James, I need you to do something for me." "What's that?" "I need you to file a counter-petition. Full custody with limited visitation for David." James raised an eyebrow. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that David voluntarily agreed to let me move the children to New York because he prioritized his new relationship over daily contact with his children. On the grounds that he's now trying to disrupt their stable environment for his own convenience." That's a strong position, but custody cases can be unpredictable. I turned back to face him. "James, how much money do I have?" "Liquid assets?" "About 12 million. Total estate value is closer to 80 million with the properties and businesses." "And David?" "Based on our research, his net worth is approximately $200,000, mostly tied up in his house. So if this becomes a war of attrition, you can outlast him financially. But that's not always how custody cases are decided." "Maybe not, but it's how they're won." The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. David flew to New York with Rebecca and their baby, staying in a hotel near the courthouse. I knew this because my security team had been tracking their movements since they arrived. Yes, I had a security team now. $12 million in liquid assets buys a lot of professional protection. The night before the hearing, David called me. "Sam, we need to talk. Talk to my lawyer. Please, 5 minutes. For the kids." "Fine, 5 minutes. Can we meet somewhere neutral? I'm at the Marriott near the courthouse." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I found David in the hotel lobby, looking tired and overwhelmed. Rebecca sat nearby with their baby, both of them looking distinctly out of place in the elegant Manhattan hotel. "Thank you for coming," David said. "You have 4 minutes left." "Sam, I want to withdraw the petition." I blinked. "You want to what?" "Withdraw the custody petition. Let things go back to the way they were." "Why?" He glanced at Rebecca, who was struggling to calm their crying baby. "Because you were right. About everything. I'm going to need you to be more specific." Rebecca thought having the kids back would help with everything. But being here, seeing how you live now, seeing how happy Tommy and Emma are, he rubbed his face. "I can't take them away from this." I looked around the hotel lobby, at the marble floors and crystal chandeliers, at the life I'd built for my children. "David, what do you want from me?" "I want to know that we can still be a family. Different than before, but still a family." "We're not a family, David. You and Rebecca and your son are a family. Tommy and Emma and I are a family. Those are two separate things. But the kids? The kids will always love you. They'll visit, they'll call, they'll send you pictures and tell you about their lives. But they live with me now." Rebecca approached us, the baby finally quiet in her arms. "Sam, I owe you an apology," she said quietly. I looked at my sister, this woman who'd systematically destroyed my marriage and was now standing in a Manhattan hotel lobby, looking exhausted and defeated. For what specifically? For everything. For David, for the affair, for encouraging this custody fight, for thinking I could just take your life and make it mine. And now I realize that some things can't be stolen. They have to be earned. I looked at David, then at Rebecca, then at their baby who would grow up never knowing the family he'd helped destroy. You're right, I said. Some things can't be stolen. I stood up to leave. Sam, David called. Will you tell Tommy and Emma that I love them, that I'm proud of them? You can tell them yourself when you call tonight. And Sam? Rebecca's voice was barely above a whisper. Will you ever forgive me? I stopped walking and turned back to face her. Becca, forgiveness isn't something you can ask for. It's something you earn through changed behavior over time. When you've proven that you're the sister I thought I knew, maybe we can talk about forgiveness. I walked out of the hotel and into the Manhattan evening, where my driver was waiting to take me home to my children. The custody papers were withdrawn the next morning. David and Rebecca flew back to Chicago that afternoon. That evening, Tommy and Emma and I sat on our roof deck, eating pizza and looking out over the city lights. Mom, Daddy sounded sad when he called tonight, Emma said. Sometimes people feel sad when they realize they've made mistakes. Will he feel better? Eventually. But that's not our job to fix. Tommy looked thoughtful. I'm glad we live here. Why's that, buddy? Because you're happy here. And when you're happy, we're happy. I hugged both of my children, these resilient, wise little people who'd adapted to so much change with such grace. I love you both so much. We love you too, Mom. As we sat there under the Manhattan stars, I realized that David had been wrong about one thing. We were still a family, just a much better one than we'd ever been before. 1 year after moving to New York, I was reviewing expansion plans for Murphy's Coffee when my assistant buzzed in with a call that would complete my transformation from discarded wife to unstoppable force. Ms. Richards, there's a reporter from Forbes on line 2. Something about a feature article on successful business acquisitions. I picked up the phone, expecting the usual business interview. Ms. Richards, this is Jennifer Walsh from Forbes. We're doing a piece on unlikely business success stories, and your name came up in our research. I'm not sure I understand. You inherited Asmal coffee shop chain and within a year have turned it into one of the fastest growing cafe franchises in the Northeast. Our sources say you're considering expansion into Chicago. Chicago. The idea had been brewing for months, ever since my operations manager suggested we explore Midwest markets. That's still in the planning stages, I said carefully. Would you be interested in discussing your business strategy for our article? We're particularly interested in stories of women rebuilding after major life changes. Rebuilding after major life changes. That was one way to describe surviving adultery, divorce, and family betrayal. I'd be happy to discuss my business philosophy. The interview was scheduled for the following week, but first I had a different call to make. Patricia, I said when my divorce attorney answered, I need you to research something for me. What's that? The non-compete clause in David's contract with Henderson and Associates, specifically whether it would prevent him from working with competing firms. Why? Because I'm considering opening Murphy's Coffee locations in Chicago, and I want to know if David's employment situation would create any complications. 3 days later, Patricia called back with information that made me smile. David's non-compete clause is ironclad. He can't work with any firm that competes with Henderson and Associates for 3 years after termination. And how many marketing firms in Chicago would be considered competitors? All of them. So David can't work in marketing in Chicago. Not unless he wants to get sued by Richard Henderson. Interesting. And what about Rebecca's position at Davidson Marketing? Her employment agreement includes a morality clause. Any behavior that reflects poorly on the company's reputation could result in termination. Such as? Adultery with a married colleague from a competing firm would probably qualify. I thought about the Forbes article, about the publicity that would come with expanding Murphy's Coffee into Chicago, about how David and Rebecca's story might become relevant when reporters started digging into my background. Patricia, I'm going to need you to prepare some documents for me. The Forbes article was published 3 weeks later with the headline, From Betrayal to Business Empire, How One Woman Turned Divorce into Success. The article detailed my inheritance, my business expansion, and my plans to bring Murphy's Coffee to new markets, including Chicago. My phone started ringing within hours of the article's publication. The first call was from my mother. Sam, I just read the article. $80 million? You inherited $80 million? Hello, Mom. Why didn't you tell us? Tell you what? That David's uncle left me his estate? When would that have come up in conversation? When we were worried about you supporting the children. When you were working in that coffee shop. When you were suggesting I stay married to David for financial security? Silence on the other end. Mom, you made your position clear when David and Rebecca were having their affair. You chose to support them. I chose to support myself. Sam, we had no idea. You had no idea because you didn't ask. You assumed I was desperate and helpless. You assumed I needed David's support to survive. We were trying to help. You were trying to manage a situation that was embarrassing for the family. There's a difference. The second call was from Rebecca. Sam, I saw the article. Congratulations, you can read. I need to ask you something. Are you really opening locations in Chicago? I'm considering it. Why? Because people are already talking. About the article, about our history. David's worried about how this might affect his job prospects. David should have thought about his job prospects before he had an affair with his colleague's sister. Sam, please. We have a baby to think about. If this gets out... If what gets out, Becca? The truth? If people find out about the affair, it could ruin us both professionally. I leaned back in my office chair, looking out at the Manhattan skyline that had become my kingdom. Let me understand this correctly. You're calling to ask me to protect your reputation from the consequences of your own actions. I'm calling to ask my sister to show some mercy. Your sister. I repeated the words slowly. The sister whose marriage you destroyed? The sister whose husband you stole? The sister whose children you tried to replace? Sam, I know I hurt you. You didn't hurt me, Becca. You taught me something valuable. What's that? That people show you who they really are if you pay attention. And you showed me that you're someone who takes what she wants and then asks for mercy when there are consequences. So you're going to destroy our lives for revenge? I'm not going to destroy anything. I'm going to build a business in the city where I was born, where I have every right to operate. If that creates problems for you and David, that's not my concern. Sam, please. Becca, here's some free advice. When you build your happiness on someone else's destruction, it's not really happiness. It's just borrowed time. I hung up and immediately called my operations manager. Maria, let's accelerate the Chicago expansion. I want to open our first location by Christmas. Which neighborhood were you thinking? I smiled, thinking about the Riverside area where Rebecca and David had bought their dream house. Somewhere with good foot traffic and excellent visibility. Somewhere people will notice. 3 months later, the first Murphy's Coffee Chicago location opened in a prime spot just 2 blocks from David and Rebecca's house. The grand opening was covered by local business journals, which mentioned my connection to the Murphy's empire and my Chicago roots. David's name wasn't mentioned in the articles. But in a city like Chicago, people talk. And when people started connecting the dots between the successful businesswoman who'd returned to open a coffee empire and the local marketing executive who'd had an affair with his sister-in-law, well, let's just say the morality clause in Rebecca's contract became very relevant very quickly. The third Murphy's Coffee Chicago location opened 6 months later, directly across from Henderson and Associates. Every morning, Richard Henderson could look out his office window and see my success. Every morning, he could remember that he'd fired the woman who was now his competition. And every morning, he could think about the choices he'd made and the consequences that followed. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes the best revenge is getting everything. 2 years after moving to New York, I was standing in the boardroom of Murphy's Coffee headquarters, listening to my CFO present quarterly earnings that exceeded all projections, when my assistant slipped me a note that made me smile. David Richards is in the lobby requesting a meeting. I excused myself from the meeting and walked to the reception area, where I found David sitting uncomfortably in an Italian leather chair, looking around at the marble floors and original artwork that decorated my corporate headquarters. He stood when he saw me, and I was struck by how much older he looked. Tired, defeated, like a man who'd bet everything on the wrong horse. Sam, thank you for seeing me. David, what brings you to New York? I need to talk to you about Tommy and Emma. My blood pressure spiked. Are they okay? They're fine. Better than fine, actually. He gestured around the opulent lobby. They're obviously doing very well. Yes, they are. Can we talk privately? I led him to a small conference room, closing the door behind us. What do you want, David? He pulled out his phone and showed me a news article with the headline, Murphy's Coffee Empire Announces Major Expansion. Congratulations. Looks like business is good. Business is very good. Sam, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. I'm always honest. Are you trying to destroy my life? I looked at him across the conference table, this man who'd once been my husband, who'd fathered my children, who'd systematically dismantled our life together for his own pleasure. David, your life is your responsibility, not mine. Rebecca lost her job. I heard. Did you have anything to do with that? Rebecca lost her job because someone at Davidson Marketing discovered she'd had an affair with a married colleague from a competing firm. That's called a morality clause violation. Someone told them. Someone with a conscience, probably. Was it you? I leaned back in my chair. David, do you really think I need to actively work to destroy your life? You've done such a thorough job of that yourself. We're struggling, Sam. The baby's medical bills, Rebecca's unemployment, my non-compete clause. Your non-compete clause that prevents you from working in Chicago marketing? You know about that? I know about a lot of things. David rubbed his face with both hands. We might lose the house. The house in Riverside? The one you bought with Rebecca while you were still married to me? Sam, please. I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible choices. But we have a child together now. A baby who doesn't deserve to suffer for my mistakes. I thought about that baby, innocent in all this, who would grow up bearing the consequences of his parents' choices. What do you want from me, David? A job. I blinked. I'm sorry? Murphy's Coffee is expanding. You need experienced managers. I know marketing. I know business operations. You want me to give you a job. I want you to give me a chance to support my family. I stared at him. This man who'd cheated on me, left me, fought me for custody of our children, and was now sitting in my boardroom asking for employment. David, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You want me to hire you to work for the company I inherited after you destroyed our marriage. I want a chance to rebuild, to prove I can be better. To who? To me? To Rebecca? To yourself? To everyone. I walked to the window that overlooked Central Park, where Tommy and Emma would be getting out of school soon, where they'd grown into confident, happy children who barely remembered the chaos their father had created in Chicago. David, do you know why Harold Murphy left me his estate? Because he felt sorry for you? Because he saw something in me that even I didn't see at the time. Strength, character, the ability to build something lasting instead of just taking what belonged to someone else. I turned back to face him. Ace, you want a job? Here's my offer. You can work for Murphy's Coffee. Starting position, minimum wage plus tips. You'll report to Maria Santos, who started as a barista and worked her way up to operations manager through talent and dedication. David's face went pale. Minimum wage? You can work your way up just like everyone else. Prove your worth through your actions instead of your connections. Sam, I have a family to support. You had a family to support when you decided to have an affair with my sister. You chose to prioritize your personal desires over your family's stability. I can't support Rebecca and the baby on minimum wage. Then I suggest Rebecca find another job, one that doesn't have a morality clause. David stood up abruptly. This is revenge, isn't it? You're enjoying this. David, if I wanted revenge, I could destroy you completely. I could make sure you never work in marketing again. I could buy your house in foreclosure and turn it into a Murphy's Coffee location. I could make your life so difficult that you'd beg me to let you work for minimum wage. I walked to the door, holding it open for him. But I don't need revenge. I have something better. What's that? I have success. I have my children's respect. I have a life I built through my own choices instead of stealing pieces of someone else's life. David walked past me toward the lobby, then stopped. Sam, do you think you'll ever forgive me? I considered the question seriously. David, I forgave you a long time ago. Not because you deserved it, but because carrying anger was weighing me down. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending your choices didn't have consequences. And Rebecca? Will you ever forgive her? Rebecca made her choice when she chose your bed over my trust. She'll have to live with that choice. What about Tommy and Emma? They miss their father. Tommy and Emma have their father. You call them every week. You see them on holidays. That was your choice too. David nodded slowly. I guess I'll see you around. Maybe. Chicago's a big city. As he walked away, I realized that I felt nothing watching him leave. No anger, no satisfaction, no regret. Just the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've built something that can't be taken away. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. Mom, Emma's drama club is performing tonight. Can you come? I typed back. Wouldn't miss it for the world. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe, because sometimes life has a way of ensuring that people who build their happiness on other people's destruction eventually face the consequences of their choices. I'd thought I lost everything when I discovered my husband's affair with my sister. Instead, I'd gained something much more valuable than anything they'd taken from me. I'd gained the power to build a life on my own terms, with my children, surrounded by success I'd earned through my own choices. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well, and I was living very, very well indeed.